Welcome back to the Crab Clown Podcast. Today's episode, we are continuing our conversation on the Enneagram with my friend Tyler. Instead of explaining the different Enneagram types with various anecdotes of our personal friends and what other texts and resources have shown us, we're going to break down the triads and the wings of the Enneagram, helping us to dive a little bit further into what the Enneagram means and how to use it practically. If you're new to the Enneagram, circle back to our previous podcast episode to be brought up to speed. Without further ado, let's get started with the conversation. Let's do this! Stand with me!
Welcome to the Crab Clown Podcast. Crab Clown Jimmy is a YouTube personality specializing in cinematic gameplay adventures in survival games such as Grounded, ARK, and 7 Days to Die. The Crab Clown Podcast, while an associated production, will vary a bit in purpose, with common themes centering around education and entertainment. Sit back and enjoy the conversation.
Well, let's pivot now, Tyler. We've been chatting a bit about this. What's important to know is that as you test for the Enneagram, you will test high on one number and then relatively high on another number. And in many cases, you should look to this test to help you identify what's called your Enneagram wing. Now, we don't need to hammer on this nail too terribly long. But what's true is that the Enneagram 1 through 9, and it does wrap around, it is a circle, it is not a line. The numbers adjacent to your number, one of them is your wing, which adds a little bit more diversity to a room full of twos like you.
Yeah.
Because you can have a room full of Enneagram type 2s. Some of them are type 2s with a 1 wing, and others are type 2s with a 3 wing. They all share the same motivation, the same true north, but their daily actions are either this, a type 1, or that, a type 3. Explain a little bit more about wings.
Yeah, so I'm going to correct you a little bit, actually.
Please, what did I say?
I would not ever tell somebody to test on the Enneagram because, just like Myers-Briggs, you can manipulate the test to be whatever you want it to be. I think a test is a great spot if you have read the descriptions of a few of them and nothing resonates. My preferred methodology of identifying yourself is to read the descriptions of all of them, pick the 2 or 3 that stand out the most, and then really read in depth and figure out, hey, this resonates with me based on there's a thing called a childhood wound that will be brought up if you really start digging into this. If those types of things relate to you, if your basic fear relates to you, depending on the website or the book you're looking at, they might call some of the same things different terminology. But I know that for myself, I can take a Myers-Briggs test and subconsciously or pseudo-consciously make it say whatever I want it to say.
Right, because a lot of folks, and you make a great point here, I did learn mine from the test, and I've known others to do it as well. But I have seen many people test incorrectly.
Yeah.
Because some people will project the self they want to be into that test.
Right.
And you make a great point here. They will project who they want to be instead of speaking truthfully about who they are.
Yeah.
And so to your point, if they do some reading on the Enneagram Institute website or many others, the book we're reading here, The Road Back to You, another great one to help put into words what those personality types are. That's really, really well said.
Once you kind of identify what your dominant number is,
okay,
that is your type. In theory, that will never change.
Correct. In theory, it should stay the same forever.
It is the same forever. Now, there might be different levels of health between growth and stress and what that looks like, but in theory, that is the same forever. And then typically, you actually default to 1 wing. So I, as a 2, typically default to a 3 wing. So I would call myself a 2-wing 3. However, depending on who you listen to and study under, a lot of Enneagram professionals will talk about the fact that you actually utilize both wings. Mm-hmm. You just have a dominant wing.
Okay.
So as opposed to a dominant number, right? Sure. My dominant number is 2. I'm a type 2. My dominant wing is 3. But depending on the day, the week, the situation, I might lean more into a 2-wing 1 than a 2-wing 3. will never show the characteristics of a 6. I kind of operate in that centered on the 2 and then fluctuate or support myself with the 1 and the 3 motivation characteristics traits.
Right. But you will typically lean into one with more frequency.
Right.
Yeah. But the other one is not off the table.
It's not off the table. No.
Okay.
No. And it kind of depends on the day. There are people that I interact with that my 1 wing comes out more so than my 3 wing.
Sure.
But I've done the hard work, the internal work to know myself enough to hopefully identify most of those situations and those people to know I'm leaning into my 3 wing right now and I need to like back off a little bit.
Sure. Well, and you think of, like we just talked about, the type 9. The type 9 is right next to the type 8.
Yeah.
And side by side, if you're a dominant 8 and a dominant 9, those are very different people.
Yep.
But if you are a type 9 with an 8 wing, you're still that peacemaker, but perhaps when triggered by the context of work, or perhaps like my friend, I think he was reacting to an emergency, he toggled on that 8 really quick.
Yep.
Where he was responding very, very quickly. You couldn't tell him no, you couldn't tell him to slow down, because he just seized the moment and was able to make some really, really wise and cutting edge decisions in the throes of an emergency.
Yeah.
Whereas on any other day at work, he would call himself a 9 wing 1, where he's just a little bit of a black and white thinker. But in the throes of an emergency, he leaned hard on that other wing.
Yeah, he can lean into it.
Yeah.
Because the situation requires it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's really well said, Tyler. And what we should recognize is that the Enneagram numbers, again, they are strategically placed one by another. Tyler will not behave like a 6, at least on purpose, unless he's trying to model or mimic or perhaps relate to someone, right? But when we are looking at the Enneagram and the numbers and their adjacency to one another, we have to be mindful that the wings that support us, I love that you used that word earlier, that's a super clear word, the wings that support us will be adjacent to us. Ergo, as a type 4, I am also a dominant wing 3. I am an achiever.
Yeah.
I like to get things done. I like to be seen as someone who is uniquely successful. You hear the word choice I'm using, right?
Great word choice.
Thank you. Right? A strategic word choice. But like, I will also lean into that 5 wing. Now that you say it in those terms, I will become very self-reflective. In a room full of extroverts, I will un-extrovert. And I will sit back and observe and practice and find security in what I know, which also fuels my anti-authority type personality traits, for better or for worse. I will lean on what I know for that security over getting things done if I'm in a room full of strong-willed people, for example.
So I think wings are super helpful. Not something we should like put a bunch of stock in. They're not going to necessarily change everything about us.
Right.
But I think in that support role, they can be super helpful tools. Just to understand ourselves better.
Yes. So read into the Enneagram, and I dare say, once you've done that, make some space for the test. Tyler and I can draw a line in the sand here, but that's okay. But do the reading. Do the reading and learn what the types are, and spend a little time acclimating to who you think you are. There are plenty of books out there. I chose The Road Back to You. I think that's a great book. It's a recent book. And then the test on the Enneagram Institute. And then the wings, again, used for support, a lovely word, but you are your dominant number. I have read in some places that plainly say will never change.
Will never change.
I have heard some others say in theory it should never change, but there are authors who would say it will never change. Now, what's true also about the Enneagram, as you look at it, you see a lot of polyhedron diagrams. If you were to be Googling the Enneagram, you see where there are just several sides to this shape. But the Enneagrams are grouped into triads. Every 3 numbers is motivated in a unique way by a certain emotion. Now, I want to give you some space to speak into this as well. But our first triad is our anger or our instinct triad, and that is the numbers 8, 9, and 1. Road Back to You. This triad is explained this way. These numbers are driven by anger. This is the anger triad. So 8s will externalize it. There are fighters, right? 9s forget it. They don't want any anger in the room. But our ones will internalize that anger. Remember, we were talking about ones. Ones are the folks who see things as right or wrong, black or white. They will moralize preferences, sometimes for better or for worse. All of them take in and respond to life instinctually or at the gut level. They tend to express themselves honestly and directly. What do you know about the anger or gut triad?
Yeah, I think the gut triad is interesting to me because it all has to do with anger. And so when we look at all of the triads, it is the whole spectrum of typically externalizing, ignoring, and then internalizing. And so with the anger triad specifically, or the gut triad specifically, we have talked about these as we kind of have gone through all the types already, but 8s are very much, I'm gonna be vocal about it. I'm taking on anger. 9s are kind of going, hey, we're just gonna pretend this doesn't exist.
They flush it, man.
And I honestly feel bad for ones because they internalize anger, they are often the hardest on themselves.
They are.
You know, I know we talked earlier about 3s striving for excellence and being successful, but I think 1s internalize failure as I did something wrong, and then there's this internal anger that they have towards themselves. It's not I'm not successful, but there's that anger of I have failed and now I'm angry at myself. And so I think 1s are probably the people I feel the most gracious towards in some senses, because that just like is very sad to me.
Sure. Well, there's also, your personality is very close to 1s, and
yeah,
you can lean on that wing, and you can lean into that person and even articulate some of those feelings for them. And we'll talk about 3s in a second, but like when 1s fail and they get angry about it, they internalize the anger. When 3s fail, they become ashamed of it.
Yes.
Right. And that's the other side of their large feelings, because they are in the feeling or heart triad, Enneagram type 2s, 3s, and 4s. That's the next triad. They are all feelings and hearts. What can you tell us about the second triad there?
So the heart triad follows that same pattern where we go externalize feelings, ignore feelings, and internalize feelings. I, as a 2, resonate with this well, obviously, but I can walk into a room and I know exactly how everybody in that room is feeling. Almost,
what a gift.
Almost instinctually. Well, a gift or a curse.
A gift and a curse.
Depending on the moment.
Double-edged sword.
But I can walk into a room, into an event, have a conversation with somebody, and I almost instantly know how they're feeling. And there's a scene from New Girl. One of the characters, Schmidt, is hardcore 3, very successful.
Yeah.
And Zoe's character, Jess, is very much a 2, and is always thinking about everybody else's feelings. And there's a scene where they're in the car that has always resonated with me, because Schmidt looks at her and goes, do you just walk around all day thinking about everybody else's feelings? And she's like, yeah, don't you? And he was like, no, never. And like, that's just everything I do is through the lens of like thinking about external feelings. 3s are very, very much feelings are a problem, ultimately.
Mine and yours, they would say.
Anybody's feelings get in the way of me, us, our team, our family, whoever being successful. Just ignore feelings. And 4s sit in their own feelings.
Yes.
Often ignoring other people's feelings for the sake of their own, and to go, well, I'm feeling sad, so you should too.
Yes. 4s sitting in their feelings is like 4s sitting in a wet diaper, man, because they can sit and ruminate and stink if they don't find a way to vocalize those things. Now I've mentioned already that Mrs. Krabs is a 3 and I'm a 4. So we are both in the feelings triad. So when feelings escalate, and I love getting to showcase a little bit of our marriage here. It's not something I get to do a lot as Crab Clown Jimmy, both on live streams or in the podcast. But as I get to brag about her, what's important to know is that, yes, you have a gift of hearing and identifying those feelings and responding in kind. Blessing and a curse, because sometimes those feelings get heavy. They become an anchor for you to drag.
Yeah.
And a 3 is trying to squelch those feelings. But, and this is what's great to know about the Enneagram, because yes, that is their true north. 3s squelching their own feelings, squelching the feelings of others for the sake of success and getting things done. But you know what a 3 can do? They can break that mold. because they're a wise and a maturing and growing person. And I am thankful that my own wife has learned to listen to and learn to articulate my own feelings. When I'm sitting in that wet diaper full of feelings, she can say, "You look overwhelmed. Do you feel overwhelmed? Because you're angry like you're overwhelmed." And she has learned to put that to words, which will often disarm a lot of my internalizing.
Yeah.
Because one of my pieces in the feeling or heart triad is that I look at myself as always missing something. Like, I don't understand what they understand. I'm not successful like they're successful. I'm not figuring it out as fast as they're figuring it out. Something's wrong with me. That is often where I start, or where a lot of my big feelings come from. But she has learned to overcome her natural tendency to squelch feelings, hers and others, to adopt my own. And in our marriage, that has been a keystone win for us. And what's true is that, many fours, maybe better ones than me or wiser ones than me, have learned to take their feelings and package it in a ball and say, "Hey, friend, can you help me do something with this?"
Yeah.
And wise fours who are very feeling heavy will learn to do that.
Yeah. I think you make a great point that is worth reiterating. We can all break the mold.
We can.
Everything we have talked about is that true north, is that default motivation. But again, everybody comes at it from a different angle with their own baggage, their own experience, their own history, all of that, their own perceptions. But that doesn't mean that any of us are stuck there.
Well said. Let's look at the third and final triad here, the fear or the head triad. This is for our 5s, 6s, and 7s. These numbers are driven by fear. Now check this out. Same thing. 5s externalize their fear. 6s internalize it, and 7s flush it. 7s don't want to be afraid of anything. Is there something scary right now? No, there's not. I deny it.
No, there's nothing happening. I have a confetti popper in my desk, and I'm throwing a 30-second party.
That confetti popper thing.
Yeah.
That's weird, but I believe it. I believe that it's a thing. Now, 6s will internalize that fear. They will presume or fantasize about things that could happen. And so they won't say it out loud, but they'll just constantly make plans, or they'll think through what ifs, or they'll, gradually piecemeal solutions to things that may never happen, and or compartmentalize it somewhere in their brain in preparation for the worst to happen. That's what internalizing it looks like. What does it look like for a 5 to externalize that fear?
I think most 5s are striving for the independence, the self-reliability. And so externalizing fear is them going, I'm going to do everything I can around me, in my environment, internally, everywhere, just to make sure that I am prepared for anything that happens, to overcome any fear. They are probably the preppers. I remember that show. I don't know where
I do remember that show.
Discovery or something, where they talk about the preppers, right? And they're the ones who are looking at all this stuff, gathering all this information on how to clean their own water, how to, if there's a global apocalypse, they're the ones who you want to be with, because they've prepared their environment around them, their house, everything, to be self-reliable and overcome the fear of anything that could possibly happen.
This group of people, and I wish we had someone from this triad in the room with us, because they could always articulate it a little bit better than us. They are, like, we call them the fear triad. I like to also call them the thinking triad, because everything we've talked about so far is born out of their minds. Like, you and I rest willfully or not in the emotional triad.
Yeah.
It's for better or for worse. We adopt, or we internalize, or we flush emotions. These guys, these men and women, will externalize, internalize fear. Like this unique emotion. It's all in their heads, for better or for worse. And again, to your earlier point, and we should celebrate this over and over, I think, but they can break the mold. They can mature. They can point one way. They can lean on another wing. There's a whole lot of variety and a whole lot of variables that go into this, but that fear triad, it is their primary motivator. And if they learn to see things and even adopt and embrace that language, I am motivated by fear. But there is a mature expression for that. Yes. And that's where I want to take us now. We've talked about it on the last half of our show, and now as we're making our way towards the end of the Enneagram talk, growth and stress. There's a unique thing here about the Enneagram that I think the Enneagram Institute really articulates well in terms of each and every single type of the Enneagram, how they behave when they are mature and healthy and growing, and how they behave when they are immature or when they are very, very stressed. And there is a unique diagram here that I'm looking at on Enneagram Institute that makes it super, super clear. And Tyler, hold me accountable to getting it right. We won't do all of them, but I'm looking at our type 1s. And in growth and healthy moments, a type 1 will behave like a 7.
The way I have to remember it is because selfishly, I always start at the 2, and I know 2s go to 4 in health, and they go to 8 in stress, and then I just follow that line. If you look at the diagram, it's 3, 6, and 9 are connected with a triangle, and everything else is connected with one weird shaped line.
Right.
But if you start at 2 and go to 4 and follow it in that direction, that is the direction of health. So 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 1, 1 becomes 7, 7 becomes 5, 5 becomes 8, 8 becomes 2.
All of that in moments of growth and health, right?
In moments of growth and health, yep.
So that
we're not transforming, right? A 2 doesn't become a 4.
Right.
We take on the characteristics, the positive characteristics, the healthy characteristics of a 4.
Of those other numbers. That's correct, because we are our numbers. And in moments of health, this is when we are mature, we are at peace with ourselves, we have owned our personality, we borrow characteristics of the numbers that Tyler just explained, but contrastingly, we can also, in moments of high stress, forget who we are. And we start borrowing traits in the other direction. So, in this way, a 2 will behave like an 8.
Yeah, it's not fun.
That is not fun. So when you're under stress, you can start bullying a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've ever seen me like that.
I haven't. I'm surprised to learn this.
All right. Yeah. A 2 starts taking on the characteristics of an 8. And because I've done a lot of the internal hard self-awareness work, I know that when I start getting mean, I probably need to take a second and figure some things out.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we follow that line, 8 takes on the unhealthy characteristics of a 5, 5 takes on 7, 7 to 1, 1 to 4, 4 to 2, and we're kind of back at where we started. And then it kind of follows that same direction with a 3, 6, and 9. And so this is another reason why I know we talked about a story off the podcast about one of our friends testing incorrectly.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm not a major fan of the test.
Yeah.
Just because of situation and the environment you're in when you take it.
That's really well said. And I point back to you correcting me earlier. And I love that you had the confidence to do that, because what's true is that the friend that we're thinking of was just finishing college, had just started a new job, had just gotten married. And he, like me, was a type 4, is a type 4. And because he was under those degrees of stress, he could not get a firm grip on his personality, especially under the pretense of taking a test online to discover who he was. And he actually tested as a 2.
Yeah.
Under stress. And remember, when we're talking about stress, we are adopting the bad characteristics or the weaker characteristics of those other numbers. And when we are healthy or confident and secure, we are adopting the better numbers in the other direction. And again, this graphic is online. I think it's really, really helpful. But this young man was very, very insecure in his stress. We 4s under high stress become very insecure, and the only way to scratch that itch is to make people like us. And so I start calling people and apologizing for things I said on the phone. Like, hey, you remember when I said that and I thought it was funny, but nobody thought it was funny? I'm like, I'm really sorry about that. And they'll say, Jimmy, that was like 5 years ago. And I'm like, I know, I never forgot it.
I know, I never forgot it. I just need you to tell me that it's okay.
I need you to tell me that it's okay, because I can't go to sleep until you tell me it's okay. But that's how I am under stress.
Yeah.
And you've already mentioned that's how you are under stress. And it's important to recognize that, again, there are so many variants here, and it's just worthy of study. So as we wind this down, just a couple of questions to clarify. I think this is really important. How has the Enneagram helped you at work, social settings, and with significant others?
understanding the Enneagram and really studying this has helped me to be a better friend, healthier person in all realms. It comes out different in family. It comes out different in friendship. It comes out different in work. For me, it comes out very different when family and work is integrated because I work with my family in one of my roles. But overall, it has helped me become healthier, better, really more self-aware, I think, just to know and kind of have the cues to say, hey, I'm being a jerk right now and I need to like take a hot second and go for a walk before we can like finish this conversation. Or like we talked about earlier, I've been able to identify, am I doing this act of service or this gift because I truly am just trying to like love on one of my friends, or am I doing it because I feel really low and I'm really stressed? I need to know that they need me in their life.
Yeah.
And so it's just giving me a framework to be able to articulate and giving me the language to articulate where I am. Am I healthy? Am I not healthy? Am I stressed? Do I need to go on vacation?
Right.
Do I need to take a day off?
Right.
Or is it just really a really stressful time in the week or in my career, the semester, wherever it is, and I need to like push through, but be aware enough to know that I know that I'm exhausted and I'm stressed and I'm acting in unhealthy ways, but I have to like check myself and get through to this point so that I can then ultimately become healthier when I have time, right? Because as adults, I'm sure you know this, like you've got a wife and kids too,
right?
And you can't just all of a sudden leave.
I can't disappear to recenter.
Right.
I have a life in tow. I chose it. I love it. And what's true about the Enneagram, and I would add to your answer, knowing what your center is allows you to find it when you lose it.
Yes.
We are going to lose it, like with your friend who just had the baby. You mentioned best friends, and best friends love each other until they don't.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have to recenter.
Yeah.
And wives and husbands love each other until they don't. Something will interrupt that. Life will, us being selfish, us being busy or overwhelmed, something will interrupt that love for one another and how we care for one another. And the whole purpose of the Enneagram is helping you and I find our center, equipping you and I to help others identify their center or talk to them as though we know their center.
Yeah.
And when we lose it, it gives us a mark to find again.
Well, and I think the other way that it's really helped, you kind of hinted at it, but is being able to know and have grace for my friends and my coworkers and my family.
Yes.
And knowing, hey, my mom thinks she's a 2, but she's definitely a 1. When we get into conversations or things happen and tensions are high, I know this is just how she's wired. This is just where she's at. And it helps me if I'm being self-aware enough and healthy enough to know that it's not a big deal. It is not a moral right and wrong that she's projecting onto me. That's not a thing.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be. Whereas if I didn't know that and I was unhealthy, it just adds to tension and stress. We can be closer and have better conversations because of that.
I think I heard Ian Morgan Cron say on his podcast, worthy of a follow if you haven't started listening to it yet. But if the Enneagram does anything for us, it helps us to get along with one another.
Yeah.
It helps us talk to one another without offending one another. And it helps us to find words that whomever we're talking to can hear. Now, what are some warnings you'd offer people who are exploring the Enneagram personality typing system for the first time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've got 2.
Okay.
The first one is be prepared. It is hard work, and it requires you to do a lot of that inner work and really be honest with yourself and self-aware a little bit. I know, quick example, I started seeing a therapist when I was 24 or something and did not know what anxiety, I knew what anxiety was, but like I didn't know that I had anxiety or what it was until we started having a conversation. And he was like, oh, do you feel like this weight on your chest and like tingling, like all this stuff? And I was like, oh yeah. And now I'm like, have I just always felt that way and thought it was normal? And now I just know it because I've been able to articulate it and put a word to it, and I've become aware of it. And I think the Enneagram can do the same thing for us. And being aware of something and where we are, and being able to know and articulate where we're currently at with our mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, is the first step in us being able to grow and become the healthiest version of ourselves. But that is not always easy, and it is not always fun, especially right away.
You have to accept some hard truths about yourself.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And as a man in his 40s, to hear someone say, Jimmy, you're just sensitive, the only thing I can say back to them is you're right.
Yeah.
Which is, can feel emasculating. Like, oh, you're a sensitive man. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I am sensitive. If I'm wise and if I'm healthy, I know how to rein it in. I know how to manage my emotions.
Yep.
I know how to control those emotions. I know not to sit in them. See, back to the wet diaper metaphor. I know how to manage those things. But to your earlier point, I can put words to them now. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sensitive because of this. Here are the type of things that offend me. I know that you didn't know that because I've not told you that, or your personality is less sensitive to it than my own. Ergo, I can show you grace, and I hope that you would reciprocate by showing me grace as you continue to learn it. But to your point, it is a lot of hard work.
It is hard work, yeah. The second warning that I would have is that, especially if you're new to the Enneagram, it is very, very tempting to type other people and to make assumptions about who they are, why they're acting a certain way, and think that you know them. You might be right. I mean, you might type them right, but they might not have done the internal work to accept those hard truths about themselves, and might not be ready to hear that. And it can be extremely off-putting for somebody to come in and say, well, you're just doing this because of this. And I think the other risk there is, like the friend we've both mentioned already, there is mistyping that happens internally, right? Whether it's through the test or not being self-aware enough or honest with yourself, even if you're trying to be, there is mistyping that happens. And sometimes it can be used as a weaponization in relationships, in work, within your family, if you are not using it to help yourself grow.
And I would offer a caution to veteran Enneagram people who've been studying it or who have taught it. For example, if you take any of my college classes, I do make them take the test. And if I have coached you on a team, I make you take the test. Like all of this, I circle back to the test. And I, again, appreciate that, yes, do the reading first, because some of them, it was very confusing, and for some of them, it was very upsetting. So I definitely see the value. But I have made the mistake often, and I have heard that sentiment in writing. I have heard it in podcasts. I've heard it from other Enneagram coaches and teachers. Do not risk typing someone who has not told you what their type is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these behaviors have so many variables and conditions and contexts that if you're not careful, you will read into some of the stronger, healthier contexts of my 2 friend behaving like an 8 when he's stressed, aiding like a bully, and then I'll see him always as an 8 and always like a bully, and I'll treat and talk to him that way when, on the other hand, he's actually very sensitive.
Yeah.
And he can articulate emotions, and he can identify who he is and so forth. But if I made the terrible mistake to assume your type based on a moment, or even several moments, or if we've been friends for years and and I just start concluding things based on your behavior, it is unfair to you. And worse, it makes me look like a fool in treating you like a category, and not like the person you are.
Wow, that is well said for a 4.
Well, thank you. See, there's hope for us too, right?
I do think on that note, I have heard some Enneagram coaches also say it is very personal.
Yeah.
Because the further you get into the Enneagram, the further you realize how some of these things are caused by what they call the childhood wound, or some fear and some trauma, and some even if you grew up in a very loving home, nobody can love everybody perfectly,
right?
And so it's your perception of how those around you treated you in your formative years is often what leads to, or is the leading factor in what leads you to the type that you would be. And for some people, that's just really hard and sensitive topics. And so if they haven't volunteered that information to you, it could be that they're dealing with stuff from their past that they're just not ready to to talk about because it feels very personal.
And if the Enneagram is anything, it is a tool to help us show kindness and love to one another well, with a degree of specificity and a degree of mindfulness of one another and where they are. Because what's true, and we've alluded to this several times, is that contexts, other people, various stress factors, various moments of peace, all the way on the other spectrum to insecurity, they affect us and they cause us to lean on one wing or another. But what's super helpful to know is that we do have a center. And if we can put that center, that true north, into words, especially when we are working on a team, when we are playing on an athletic team, when we are coaching someone, when we are mentoring or discipling someone, we are communicating in a language that they understand. And there's no greater source of dignity than looking at another person across the table, or for example, if you're playing online or if you're in a virtual world or wherever you find your friends and people, looking at or talking to those people with language that they can hear and understand that is unique to their personality. And if you can adopt that type of language with a wider variety of people, you are just more and more capable of showing love and kindness and dignity and respect in a world that sorely needs it, Tyler.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on the Enneagram before we wind down.
I think it's life-changing. And if you are hesitant to it, I know there's a lot of hot takes out there about it, but I do think that there is truth in all of these things, whether it's Myers-Briggs or the DISC. They all have their flaws. They all have their flaws, but they all also contain some level of truth. And I think anything like this to help make us better, healthier versions of ourselves and live in better community in a world that is hurting and needs it is worth it. So I guess those are my thoughts.
Well, I have nothing more to add to that. This has been a delightful conversation with you. Thank you for spending so much time with me, Tyler. I love getting to hear your heart and your mind on this incredible topic. I know it's been a blessing to me. I know it's been a blessing to you. I certainly miss working with you. I'm glad we get to reminisce about some of the people that we love and the times that have been the most meaningful to us. But if you want to learn more about the Enneagram, scroll down into the description box below. Have a look at the Enneagram Institute. Check out Cron and Stabile's book, The Road Back to You, and a wide variety of other resources online and in print that can help you understand this and use it really, really well. Tyler, thank you so much for your valuable time tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Crab Clown Podcast. The Enneagram has been personally very meaningful to me and very helpful in my marriage and in my workplace, as well as various other contexts. I hope what we've talked about today has brought some clarity to the Enneagram, and perhaps this tool becomes useful to you in the future as well. If you like the work we do here at the Crab Clown Podcast, let me invite you to join our Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support this type of work and help spread our message to other viewers. Stick around for more good stuff here at Crab Clown Jimmy.